The CEO laughed when she saw his rusted pickup parked beside her glass and steel headquarters, but before the day was over, that same battered truck would become the only place she felt safe. What she did not know was that the man standing beside it had once sacrificed everything to keep a promise, and the little girl sitting in the passenger seat was carrying a secret that would eventually force the most powerful woman in the company to confront the emptiness inside herself. If you believe kindness can change a life, forgiveness can heal a heart, hope can survive impossible circumstances, and second chances are worth fighting for, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, because this story is about to remind us that sometimes the people we look down on are the very people who can teach us how to stand again. Everett Hale arrived at Northbridge Technologies just after sunrise, driving a 20-year-old Ford pickup whose faded blue paint had been dulled by years of rain, dust, and hard work. One headlight was slightly crooked, the passenger door carried a shallow dent, and the truck's engine made a rough coughing sound whenever Everett turned the key. Yet Everett treated it with a strange tenderness, wiping the dashboard every morning and keeping a small photograph tucked beneath the visor. Beside him sat his 9-year-old daughter, Maisie, holding a paper bag containing 2 peanut butter sandwiches and an apple she had carefully cut in half. Everett had taken the morning off from his repair shop because he had been summoned to Northbridge for an interview. He needed the contract badly. His small garage was barely surviving, and after his wife had died 3 years earlier, every bill, school expense, grocery receipt, and repair payment had become his responsibility alone. The company needed someone to restore a fleet of neglected service vehicles, and Everett's reputation as a mechanic was extraordinary. He had no university degree, no expensive suit, and no polished resume filled with corporate achievements. What he had was 30 years of experience, honest hands, and a reputation for fixing machines other mechanics had already declared hopeless. But when he stepped from his old pickup in worn work boots and a clean but inexpensive jacket, he immediately noticed people staring. Some employees glanced at the truck and smiled. Others whispered. Everett ignored them and walked inside with Maisie holding his hand. Then came Vivian Mercer. At 38, Vivian was the youngest CEO in Northbridge's history. She had built her reputation on discipline, perfection, and an almost frightening ability to recognize weakness. She arrived in a black luxury sedan, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and carrying a leather folder that cost more than Everett's truck was worth. As she crossed the parking area, her eyes landed on his pickup. She stopped, looked at it for several seconds, and gave a small scoff. She asked Everett if he was certain he had come to the right company, because Northbridge was hiring a professional contractor, not someone who appeared to have driven directly out of a scrapyard. The words were sharp, embarrassing, and completely unnecessary. Everett's face tightened, but he simply looked down at Maisie, who was watching Vivian with quiet disappointment. Instead of defending himself, Everett thanked Vivian for the opportunity and said that he would let his work speak for him. That answer irritated her even more because she was accustomed to people trying to impress her. Everett did not. He walked into the maintenance yard, inspected the damaged vehicles, and within 20 minutes had identified a problem that 3 highly paid engineers had missed for weeks. He explained that the fleet failures were not separate mechanical issues but symptoms of one neglected electrical system. His solution would save Northbridge hundreds of thousands of dollars. Vivian listened from a distance, increasingly uncomfortable. The man she had judged by his truck had diagnosed the company's biggest operational problem faster than her entire maintenance department. Still, pride prevented her from apologizing. Instead, she approved a temporary contract and told Everett that he would have 1 week to prove himself. Everett accepted. For the next several days, he worked before most employees arrived and stayed until the afternoon sun began fading behind the buildings. Maisie often sat quietly in the truck doing her homework while he worked. She had learned not to complain. She knew her father was tired. She knew money was tight. She also knew he had sold his wedding ring months earlier to pay her school fees, though he had never told her why he no longer wore it. Vivian began noticing things she had previously ignored. She noticed Everett never took expensive lunches. She noticed he repaired broken equipment instead of replacing it. She noticed he sometimes skipped his own meal and gave the food to Maisie. Most importantly, she noticed that every employee who worked with him seemed to trust him. One afternoon, Vivian found Everett sitting on the curb beside the old pickup while Maisie struggled with a math worksheet. Everett patiently helped her understand fractions, even though his hands were covered in grease and his shirt was soaked with sweat. Vivian watched from the doorway, and for a brief moment something inside her softened. She had grown up believing success meant never needing anyone. Her father had taught her that weakness invited betrayal, and after his death she had turned that lesson into a personal law. She had built Northbridge into a powerful company, but somewhere along the way she had forgotten how to be gentle. Then the storm came. The weather changed suddenly in the middle of the afternoon. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, wind whipped through the parking lot, and rain began striking the windows so hard that the entire building seemed to tremble. Employees rushed toward their cars. Managers called families. Security staff warned everyone to leave before the roads became dangerous. Vivian was supposed to drive home with her assistant, but a fallen tree blocked the main access road. Her assistant had already left through another exit, believing Vivian had followed. Within minutes, the parking lot was nearly empty. Nearly. Everett was still there. He had discovered that one of the company's delivery vans was stranded near the rear gate, and he refused to leave until he made sure nobody was trapped inside. After securing the vehicle, he returned to his pickup and found Vivian standing alone beneath the building's awning, staring helplessly at the flooded driveway. The CEO who had mocked his truck now had nowhere to go. Everett did not remind her of what she had said. He simply opened the passenger door and offered her a place inside. Vivian hesitated, embarrassed by the irony. The truck was old, cramped, and smelled faintly of motor oil, but the rain was becoming dangerous. She climbed in. Maisie was sitting in the back seat, wrapped in a small blanket. She smiled politely and moved over to make room. Everett started the engine, but the truck struggled against the wind. He drove slowly, searching for a safe route while rain hammered the windshield. Vivian sat silently beside him, watching his hands grip the steering wheel. For the first time, she noticed the scar across his knuckles. She asked about it, and Everett explained that he had received it years earlier while repairing machinery at a factory. He had been working overtime because his wife had been pregnant with Maisie and they needed money for the hospital. He had almost lost 2 fingers, but he kept working because he could not afford to lose the job. Vivian looked at him differently. As the storm intensified, the truck reached a hill where water had flooded the road. Everett stopped. The safest option was to wait. Rain poured around them, and the sky remained dark, but the world inside that old pickup became strangely quiet. Vivian finally admitted that she had judged him. She told Everett that she had seen the truck and assumed it represented failure. Everett looked toward the windshield and said that the truck represented something completely different to him. It was the vehicle that had carried his wife to the hospital when Maisie was born. It had taken his family on their last vacation together. It had carried groceries when money was scarce, furniture when they moved, and his daughter to school every morning after her mother died. It was dented because life had been hard, but Everett had never considered it worthless. Those words struck Vivian harder than any criticism could have. She suddenly remembered her own childhood. Her father had once owned an old pickup almost identical in shape to Everett's. Before becoming a wealthy businessman, he had used that truck to deliver tools, materials, and equipment while building the company from nothing. Vivian had spent years trying to erase those humble beginnings because she believed success required looking successful. She realized she had been ashamed of the very struggle that had created everything she possessed. The rain eventually weakened, and pale daylight returned through the clouds. Everett drove Vivian back toward town, but before they reached her home, she asked him to stop outside Northbridge. There, she walked into the building carrying the folder from her office. Everett thought she was going to end his contract. Instead, Vivian stood before the entire leadership team and admitted that she had made a mistake. She said Everett had saved the company more money in 1 week than some executives had saved in a year. She said his knowledge deserved respect, but more importantly, she admitted that she had judged his character by his possessions. Then she did something no one expected. She offered Everett a permanent leadership position overseeing Northbridge's vehicle operations and maintenance division, with a salary that would allow him to keep his garage open if he wanted. She also created a scholarship fund in honor of his late wife for children of company employees who had lost a parent. Everett accepted the position, but only after making Vivian promise that the scholarship would help families without requiring them to prove they were poor enough to deserve kindness. Vivian agreed. Months later, the old pickup still sat in the Northbridge parking lot. Employees had offered to restore it, but Everett refused to let them replace every scratch and dent. He said those marks were part of its history. Vivian eventually understood. She even began driving it occasionally when she needed to remember where she came from. Maisie became a familiar face around the company. She would visit her father after school, and Vivian often helped her with homework. The CEO who once believed vulnerability was weakness slowly became someone who could admit mistakes, apologize without excuses, and listen before judging. One afternoon, Vivian stood beside the pickup and looked at its faded paint. Everett was repairing a loose mirror while Maisie laughed nearby. Vivian realized that the most valuable thing she had ever gained from Northbridge was not another contract, another promotion, or another $1 million deal. It was humility. Everett had never needed to prove that he was valuable. He simply kept showing up, carrying his responsibilities, loving his daughter, and doing honest work. His old truck had survived because he cared for it. His family had survived because he refused to give up. And Vivian's heart had begun healing because, for once, someone had given her the chance to become better without humiliating her for being imperfect. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. Sometimes the person sitting beside you in an old truck has more courage than the person sitting behind a $1 million desk. Sometimes a dent is not evidence of failure but proof that something survived. Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who never fall, but the ones who keep moving forward while carrying someone they love. And sometimes, the greatest second chance is not the one you give someone else. It is the one you finally give yourself. Before we reach the final thought, tell us something meaningful in the comments. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance, only to discover later that they were carrying a story you could never have imagined? Share the lesson you took from this story with our community. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because in a world that often measures people by cars, clothes, money, titles, and appearances, we should never forget that character cannot be parked in a driveway, kindness cannot be bought in a showroom, and a person's worth can never be measured by what they drive. Sometimes, the most beautiful hearts arrive in the oldest vehicles, carrying the heaviest burdens, and still finding enough room to give someone else a ride home.